Skillshare is for designers, photographers, marketers, artists, and lifelong learners. Skillshare is for foodies, commuters, risk takers, the young, and the young at heart. It's for strategists, free spirits, purists, the bold, the curious, the characters, the makers, and the breakers. Skillshare is for everyone, an online learning community with thousands of classes to advance your career, improve the world, and pursue the work you love. What will you learn next? It all starts on Skillshare.
I'm going to speak briefly about another kind of sentence, a sentence that I haven't dealt with. It's what's known as the passive voice. First note, that is the passive with a V, not the past, as in the past tense, something that happened yesterday or last year or 100 years ago. So it's not the past tense, but the passive voice. Now, first, let me remind you of the pattern that we have been discussing. The pattern that we've been discussing has been that of subject, object, verb. The boy hit the ball. Mary baked a cake. Okay, the dog chased the car. So that's the normal or canonical pattern in the English language called the active voice. There's another pattern that is equally possible, and that's what we're going to be discussing for just a couple minutes. This other kind of sentence is called the passive voice sentence, and it follows the pattern of something was done by somebody. So I'm going to give you a couple of different examples, first in the active voice and then the passive voice, and you can start to see how the form changes between the two. So the normal form, and then using the air quotes again, many people saw the ad for the new computer. Or, in the passive voice, the ad for the new computer was seen by many people. Maybe less complicated. Our team won the game. Versus, in the passive voice, the game was won by our team. Okay, so start to see the pattern there. And in the next slide, I'm going to show you a little diagram and show you what happens to the various parts of the sentence in the rearrangement, as it were, from the active voice to the passive voice. Here I'm going to break it down a little bit more, so hopefully we can see what's going on in the shift from the active voice to the passive voice. So again, remember, in the active voice, we have the order of the subject, then the verb, then the object. So in the sentence, the very simple sentence, the boy hit the ball, the boy is the actor, okay, the person, place, or thing who's performing the action, and then the verb comes, and that's to hit, the verb hit in the past tense, the boy hit. And what did the boy hit? The boy hit the ball. So the ball is receiving the action. It is the object of the verb. However, in the passive voice, and we can see a little crisscross I've drawn here, what happens to the parts of the sentence? The ball, who's receiving the action, crosses over to become the subject of the sentence. The ball was hit by the boy. And then the actor of the action, the boy, who's performing the action, becomes the object of the preposition, called the object of the preposition, usually the preposition by. So that's usually the form used in the passive voice. And the verb takes the form of was hit, is being hit, has been hit. It takes that kind of form. Okay, so we have this kind of crisscross being performed here in the transfer from the active voice to the passive voice. One thing to note about the passive voice is that in this form, the subject, that is the actor of the action, may disappear altogether. So for instance, when you were a kid and you were playing and you had your friends over and you're all playing inside the house, maybe it was a rainy day or something, and from the other room your mother heard a big crash, something being smashed, and she went in and found her favorite vase in pieces all over the floor, And she asked, what happened? And very cleverly, as children are, you said, the vase was knocked off the table. So you notice how in using the passive voice, you would have managed to avoid saying who precisely knocked the vase off the table. Well, that's what the passive voice allows you to do. I'll give you an illustration as to why English language culture doesn't like the passive voice. For one thing, our culture likes to ascribe responsibility, either blame or credit, to particular actions. And the passive voice, kind of for that reason, is a favorite of politicians and very often business people who don't want responsibility for particular actions ascribed to them. So here's a story. Many years ago, a long time before a lot of you can remember, some of you who might be around my age might remember this, when Richard Nixon was driven for office for essentially running a burglary operation out of the White House in what was called the Watergate Scandal. Well, before he was forced to resign, he tried to explain what had happened, that essentially actions that were inexplicable and inexcusable, and that he was using the power of the presidency to recruit a team of essentially burglars to burglarize various offices of political opponents and obtain private information. So anyway, so he tried to explain this, and he said mistakes were made. So notice that he didn't say I made mistakes. He didn't say I really messed up. It's my fault. I take the blame. He said mistakes were made. They're kind of made. They're out there, and they were kind of made. And we're not going to talk about who made the mistakes or whose judgment was at fault here. We don't need to go into that. They're just they're mistakes, and they were kind of made. They're kind of developed in this cloud, this amorphous cloud. Anyway, so you see where I'm going with this. We're not very fond of that type of speech, that type of language uses that obfuscates the actor and responsibility. Keep in mind that language is as much a part of culture as it is code. It's not just code to communicate, but we express our culture in language. And there's something about English language culture, or at least American English language culture, that is not terribly fond of the passive voice. In fact, many writing guides will tell you you should not use the passive voice, or at least not use it frequently. Sometimes, however, you have reason to use it. So, for instance, if I were showing you a baseball that I had acquired that had been hit out of the park by Babe Ruth many, many years ago, I might say, this ball, imagine I'm holding a baseball right here, this ball was hit out of the park by Babe Ruth. So you see, was hit out of the park by Babe Ruth. That's the passive construction. And I use that construction because I want to emphasize the aspect of the ball that's most important. So there are valid reasons to use the passive voice, but unless you have such a valid reason, you should avoid it. If for no other reason, not because it's a bad construction, but because there's a lot in our culture of language that does not like it. So I hope this is helpful in clarifying this aspect of the English sentence. We're going to go on, but before we do, you might want to take the test your knowledge exercise that's attached to this particular lecture, just to make sure that you have a firm grasp of the passive sentence.
That's all, folks.